Hi guys, just waiting for everybody to arrive. While I'm waiting, I'll just see if I can get my iron going again. Hi, I can see somebody's there. Just trying to get my iron working. It's just leaking again. It's a good iron, but for some reason, every time I go live, it decides not to work. Anyway, yeah, can't feel any heat coming out of it. I've just taken the water out from the bottom. Sometimes that is a problem. But we'll just put up the Soho sweater today. Last week we got up to the stage where we put one of the sleeves in. I'm just wearing my little hacked version today. I haven't actually put the lower sleeve on. Well, I did have the lower sleeve on, and then I decided to cut it off because it wasn't matching. The colour wasn't matching properly, and I've just put elastic in the bottom. And I also took the binding off the neckline, and I just created like a fold-over bias binding there. So that's what I'm wearing today. So it's 11:02, so I may as well just get started. So yeah, we're up to the sleeve. Now, over the past week, I've been thinking about this sleeve. In my instructions, I get you to sew it. So I've sewn the sleeve in like this. So we're up to this part. Oh, and you can see I'm in a different part of the room today. I moved the table around because I thought it was a bit last week. So we've sewn the sleeve in. We haven't sewn the side seams. Now, the next instruction is to sew the side seams together, and then we insert the lower ribbing, the cuff. But I thought about a ready-to-wear method that they use in fast fashion industry, where you could sew the ribbing on to the open sleeve and then do your little top stitch and then sew the whole side seam together. Now, what I'll do today is do both versions on both sleeves and see which looks the nicest, because a lot of the time the ready-to-wear methods, they're fast, but they don't always look finished. So I thought we'll try it out and see what we decide we like better. And if it actually works, I might even change the instructions on the pattern to sew it like that, but we'll see. All right, so where we're up to is sewing the side seams together. All right, so you've got your sleeve in, it's gathered nicely, and I sewed my other sleeve in as well, so I'm ready to go. Now, where are we? So in your instructions, it will tell you right sides together to line up the sleeve and the side seam, and you're going to sew that from the end of the sleeve down to the waist. The most important part here is to line up at the underarm point, those seams, the underarm seam. So I always start by putting a pin there. I have a little method when I'm sewing. I'll pin my notches, my intersecting seams first, and then I'll go to the edge. So I'm going to go to the edge of the sleeve and pin that together. Because what I find in my classes, a lot of people do, they'll start pinning from one end and they'll pin to the hem and they'll go, oh, I'm 2 centimeters out. And that's because they haven't pinned those points and then eased in between. So patterns, you'll often find there's a little bit of ease between the front and the back. So if you just go and pin from one end to the other, you will be out a little bit. So pin those points. So from one end to the underarm point in this case, and then I'm going to pin, I've got a little notch there, so I'm going to match my notch. Okay, pin that. And then I'm going to pin at the hem. So I know then that my hem will be even. I won't have this extra little bit that we get sometimes if we don't do this method. All right, so I've got those important parts pinned, and then I can go and pin the rest of it. And at that point, if you find that one piece of fabric looks a little bit bigger than the other, that's where you just pull both of the pieces of fabric together, and that's called easing to fit. And over time, this becomes natural, it's easy, but as a beginner, you might find it a little bit tricky. I always use sort of that part of my hand there to hold my fabric like that as I'm pulling the pieces of fabric together. This sort of fabric with stretch is easy because it stretches nicely, but you find sometimes wovens are a little bit trickier. All right, so I've got that side seam and the underarm seam pinned together, and we're going to sew in one continuous line. So you can do that on your sewing machine with a zigzag stitch with your 1 centimetre seam allowance, or just go straight to the overlocker. So I'm going straight to my overlocker. Whoops, I've got 2 chairs here today. I might just swap onto that one. And I've got my big pink fluffy slippers on today too. Me though. And my pink fluffy slippers, which I got from Peter Alexander. They weren't very cheap though, I have to say. I splashed out, but I do like them. All right, so I'm just sewing my 1 centimetre seam allowance here. Okay, taking my pins out, making sure to take the pins out before you get to them. You do not want to overlock or sew actually over the top of a pin. You don't want to sew, I know a lot of people do sew over the top of their pins, especially if you've got them perpendicular, but they do, well, there's a perfect example. That one's a little bent. They do bend the pins, and it's annoying when you go to get a pin and it's bent. So also it might break. You know, a lot of the times when it's perpendicular, it won't break, but there is the chance it will. And, you know, if you're not wearing glasses, it's a little bit dangerous. Now I'm just getting up to this underarm seam here, and it's a bit bulky, so I'm lifting my presser foot up and popping the seam underneath the foot. There we go. Now it's got through it. Taking the pins out. Yes, so we're out of lockdown here in Melbourne for now. Let's hope it stays that way. All right, so that's one side seam done. I'm not going to do the other side seam because I want to try my other method. All right, but if we're carrying on with this method, I suppose I better get my instructions out just in case I forget my own instructions. But we are going to put the ribbing cuff in at this point. So we've gone through the side seams. Yep, I've said overlock, stitch, and press. So you can go and press that. I'm not going to press it because my eye is not happy at the moment. Okay, and the lowest, so we're up to the lower sleeve, yeah, which is your ribbing. It should look like this. Okay, so right sides together. You're going to stitch the lower seam together. So that's really easy. So you're just popping it together like that. And again, pop a couple of pins in there. You know, if you're experienced, you can probably go without the pins. But I think just to be on the safe side, just a couple of pins, keep it together. There's nothing worse than, you know, thinking you're doing okay. And then you get to the end of it and realise, oh, I should have had a couple of pins and I would have saved myself a lot of heartache. Okay, so there we go. I'll just pin that together. So it's right sides together, and I'm going to sew that seam. So 1 centimetre seam allowance again. Looking for these pink fluffy slippers. They're hard to sew in, even though they're comfy. You know, fashion over comfort, right? Or comfort. No, I've got that back to front. Comfort in this case. All right. There we go. 1 centimetre seam allowance. And there's a little kick at the end of your lower sleeve. I'll just show you. That's the hem point. So if you have a look here, I don't know if you can see that. There's a tiny little kick where it goes out. Try not to just sew, if you're sewing with the overlocker, cut that off and sew it straight, because that forms part of the hem when it folds back up. So having that little angle just helps keep it flat. If you sew it off, it ends up creating this sort of little pucker. Okay, so I'm going to try and keep that angle here as much as I can. There we go, that's good. All right. Now, the next thing, put my pins over there. Turn your sweater right side out. And there am I. There we go. And I realised after I watched back last week, this isn't the best colour to sew in for TV or YouTube. But because we're in lockdown, it's all I had available at the time. So I'm just going with it. And also just chop back those overlocker threads so they don't get in your way. Okay, so right sides together. So turn the cuff right side out as well. And you've got your sweater right side out. Actually, sorry, turn that cuff back around inside out because you want to insert that so it's right sides together. We need to sew this cuff to the lower edge of the sleeve. So we're going to go right sides together, matching the underarm seam. So you've got an underarm seam on the cuff and an underarm seam on the sweater. So that's the first point that I match. And so actually, what am I doing? I do need it right side out. There we go. Okay, so I'll pin that together. So where that underarm point is, we're going to pin there. Now, before you go on, actually, I should have just mentioned there is a notch on the lower sleeve, on the upper sleeve as well, and that is the halfway point. So you'll also have a notch on your lower sleeve, and we're going to match those. So you're matching the seam. I just realised I should have this around this way to make it easier for myself. So it's actually inside out, makes it easier to pin together. And I'll just tuck that in there. So right sides together. So the underarm point, there we go, pin in there. And then matching the notch. So this one's a nice easy one because you've got your little notches there. Okay. And then it's just a matter again of just stretching that rib band to match the sleeve edge. So I'll just stretch that and pin that in place. And then you're going to sew that together. 1 centimetre seam allowance. There we go. You can hear some talking in the background. It's because my partner, he works from home during COVID and he does a lot of meetings online. So I've closed all the doors, but I can still hear a little bit of it. All right. So now this is a little bit trickier sewing because it's in such a small area. So if you feel comfortable, just go and overlock it, or you might want to baste it in place first. And in fact, I probably tell you to do that in the instructions. Yes. Okay. So in the instructions, I've told you to baste it first. And then check the fit, because I'm just sewing this because, you know, I want to show you how to do it. But if I was wanting to make sure it fits me, at this point I would just baste it with a long machine stitch, and then we're going to overlock it after that, after you've fitted it. But I'm just going to go and overlock it. Okay, so I start at the seam. Take that pin out, put that there. Okay. Oh. Go, trying to get my foot around. It seems to be twisted. There we go. All right. So 1 centimetre seam allowance again, all the way around. So you're just stretching that banding and taking the pins out as you go. Okay. So I'm up to the notch, and that's still matching, so that's good. And then when we get back to the seam, I'll just continue to overlock off. All right, so that's done. And you can see I've got cream, white, black thread today because I opened my studio yesterday, so I took my black thread back in, a couple of spools. I don't know why I only took 2. And then when I came to do this morning from home, I realised that I don't have any black overlocking thread. I've got 2 spools, so it doesn't matter. That's fine. This is just to show you anyway. All right, so we've done that. And now you're going to press that seam towards the sleeve, yes, so towards this part of the sweater, because we want to top stitch that from the outside now. And again, the top stitch, you can use a twin needle or your zigzag stitch on the machine. Now my iron is not really working very well today, so let's see if I can get it going again. But if you've got an iron that's working well, then go for it. So you're pressing that seam towards the body. And then this is the tricky part. So I'll just read the instructions for you. So press the seam towards the upper sleeve and top stitch close to the seam using a zigzag stitch or twin needle, as with the neckband. Use your fingers to keep the seam allowance facing towards the upper sleeve. So this step is a little tricky as there is a lot of sweater now to get in under the press foot. Take your time and lift the press foot into its highest position to slide the sweater through the hem under the foot and stitch a few centimetres at a time. So you can see we've got that sleeve on now. It is really tricky to get in and do that. But if you go and pin the seam allowance to start with towards the sweater, you'll find it's much easier to sew. So the top stitch, again, is that zigzag stitch. So I'm using a width. You can use a width for top stitch of 2 and 2 or 2.5 and 2.5. That's width and length. Whatever you like. Or a twin needle. I'm not using the twin needle today because it just takes too long to change the needles. But if you've got time, you can do that. All right. So back over to my regular sewing machine to do the top stitching. So like I said, it's very hard to get in here. So lift your press foot up. So I don't know if you know this or not, but your press foot, you can go up like that and it stays in that position. You can also lift it a little bit higher, but you need to hold it. It won't stay in that position. So just lift it really high and get that sweater in under there. And again, I'm going to start on the side seam, the underarm seam, I should say. There we go. So you wriggle it all around until you get to the point where you want to start. So squish it in there. There we go. So even though I've got the pins in, and I might take my my free arm off as well. That might help a little bit. Take that off. Just to smooth that fabric out. Okay. So my pin's holding the seam allowance towards the sweater, but I just want to make sure, just feeling with my fingers, that it's still staying there. Okay. So again, just a couple of millimetres away from that seam. So I'm on zigzag, yes. Back stitch. And around I go. So a couple of centimetres at a time. So you watch, I'll stop, needle down, and I'll move everything around again. Take the pin out, hold with my fingers. So once you actually get it in under the machine, that's the hard bit. It's not so hard. It's just getting it in there and lined up to start with. So just take your time with that. Be a little bit patient. And like I said, after I do this one, I'm going to try another method for inserting this lower sleeve. So by top stitching this, it just helps to keep that seam allowance flat. There we go. At the end, and I'll back stitch. Chop that off. Okay, take that out and I'll show you what that looks like. Right, whoops, I think I've done something with on my computer. I can't see what I'm doing there. There we go. Okay, so I'll show you. So I've just top stitched around there. Can you see that? Yeah, that looks all right. I've got black thread. It'd be nicer if I had matching thread, but I don't. So that will do. Okay, so that's the sleeve in. I just have to hem that sleeve now. I'll just show what it's looking like so far. It's getting there. You see that? Yeah. All right. So now I'll leave the hemming of the sleeve for now because I want to do the other sleeve first. I'm going to try a different method this time. So I have the sleeve open. So we haven't sewn the side seam on this side. And then I'm going to grab my lower sleeve and right sides together. I'm going to match that center notch, pin it to the upper sleeve, and then pin the edge. I think this is going to be a much easier way, but whether it looks the same, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it will. With stretch fabric, you know, it's easy to get away with things that you wouldn't get away with normally because it's very forgiving. Okay. Just ease that all to fit, and then I'll sew that. So I'm sewing with a 1 centimetre seam allowance again. I'm just going to go straight to the overlocker. Sew that seam. I'm just going to untwist my foot here. It's just twisting up on me. There we go. Okie dokie. Here we go. I feel very low on this table. Now, I was talking about fitting before. I definitely advise on fitting as you go. So I'm not fitting because I just want, you know, to get through this streams, as you know, so that you can get on with things. But at this point, when I sew this side seam now, if I was to do it this way, I would baste it together because I want to try it on. And if I felt like the cuff was not tight enough, then I could go and change that. But if you just go and overlock it, it's a nightmare having to unpick overlocking. So I definitely recommend fitting as you go. All right, so we've done that. Now I can top stitch. So this is going to be much easier. I don't have to shove it all onto the sewing machine this time. I would press that seam towards the body, but I'm actually just going to feel it with my fingers. And then just zigzag with your top stitch or your twin needle. So this is much easier to top stitch, I have to say, much, much easier. So if this method works, I am actually going to change, well, not change the pattern instructions, but give you 2 ways of doing it. I'll add to the pattern instructions. I think the method that I've got in the instructions is probably a better way of fitting because you can get that rib cuff to fit really well, whereas this way you would have to take it all in one go. So we'll see. Pros and cons to both. Okay, almost at the end here. And then back stitch. All right, so that's done. So that was an easy top stitch. I'll show you that. So this is what it's looking like now. There we go. Yeah, and I'll give that another little press. If my arm was working. Let's see, is it working yet? Honestly, I have no idea. If anybody knows why this thing is on, I can feel it's hot. It keeps flashing at me. It doesn't want to warm up. It's something to do with the water. All right. Anyway, so now we're going to sew from the cuff all the way down to the hem. So chop off any loose threads Match that underarm point, just like we did before. Match the cuff at this point. And then we're going to match where the ribbing meets at that seam, the lower sleeve and upper sleeve. And then we can pin in between. Okay, couple of pins there. Yes, so I started my classes again this week because we're out of lockdown, which was nice. It was so nice to go back into the studio and, you know, be around people face to face. And it was my birthday during lockdown, sadly. That's 2 birthdays I've had during lockdown now. And my twin brother was supposed to come and visit from Queensland. I haven't seen him in 2 years. And his flight had to get cancelled, which was a bit of a bummer. But the girls in my class yesterday, who come regularly every week, brought in a beautiful chocolate cake for me. So that made me happy. It was beautiful. All right. Ouch. Ow. That really hurt, that one. Okay, so I've pinned from the wrist to the hem. And now I'm going to overlock that. Again, with the 1 centimetre seam allowance. Almost at the end. There we go. That's done. So that's that method. I'm going to double check it and have a look what it looks like now. So I'm going to turn it all right side out. It's starting to look good. Look at that. So I'm going to have a look at both my sleeves here, because I can't even remember which one I did which method, but I'll be able to tell by looking at the join there. Yeah, that's the fast way. That's the more couture way. Okay, so the fast way, yeah, I'm about 1 millimetre out at that seam. So I suppose, yeah, it's not as precise as this sort of sewing. But you know what? For this sort of garment, I think it's okay. So I might put that option in my instructions because it is definitely an easier way for beginners, that's for sure. Okay, so now we're up to hemming the sleeve. So that's really easy. I'm going to chop that thread off. I like to chop my threads off as I go, otherwise they just get in your way and they get on your nerves. Okay, so we're up to hemming the sleeve. So you can overlock the raw edge for professional finish. This is what I'm saying in my instructions. But because this doesn't fray, you actually don't have to. And, you know, I suppose it depends on what you want it to look like. But sometimes I find the overlocker, if you overlock it and then you go and top stitch it, it can add a little bit of bulk to it. So for fabric like this that doesn't fray, I just hem it up. I don't even worry about the overlocker. But if you want, you can. So you would just go and overlock around that edge. And then you're going to press it up. 2.5 centimetres is the seam, is the hem depth. So I better get my measuring tape. Where is that? Here it is. And you would press it if you had it working on it. No, still not working. Sorry, I'm banging on about that today. It's annoying me now that it's not working. All right. So 2.5 centimeters. No, that's 1 inch. So I'm sort of going to eyeball it because I can. 1 inch. I'm going to pin it from the right side because I want to sew from the right side. But you'll go and press this hem up by 2.5 centimeters. Actually, no, sorry. I'm going to scrap what I just said then. I'm going to pin it from the wrong side. It's easier to sew from the wrong side. Top stitching is best done from the right side. It looks nicer. But with a little cuff like this, it's actually easier to sew from the inside. So pin it from the inside like I'm doing here. See, I'm just pinning around that hem. And look, I am eyeballing it, but I will get my measuring tape out just to double check that. Is 2.5 centimeters all the way around, which is about 1 inch. Yep, that looks pretty good. Yep, great. And then it's just a matter of top stitching. So if you were using a twin needle, you would definitely have to do it from the outside, from the right side. But I'm using the zigzag, so I'm going to zigzag it from the inside. Oh, I just found a needle on the floor. Better pick that one up. Okay. So I just might just change that bottom thread there. Just a second. Here we go. Okay. So I'm going to zigzag from the inside. So I'm just popping my cuff underneath the foot there. And you just, when you're hemming it, it's just a couple of millimeters away from the edge of the fabric. Back stitch. I need my wrist pin cushion today. I haven't got it here. All right. Now to keep this even from the outside, line up your folded edge, so that's the edge out here, with one of the seam allowance numbers on your plate. So mine's sort of lining up with the 5/8 of an inch now because I've allowed a couple of millimeters for the edge. So if I keep my folded edge in line with that, it will look even from the outside, even though I'm sewing from the inside. So you can see what I'm doing here. I'll sew a couple of, centimeters, and then I'll stop, and then I move it all around. Centimeters and stop. I'm just looking at the time because I do have to finish at 12 today. There we go. Keep going. There's the pin. But we are going to get finished because we've only got the hem to do after this. And in fact, I might do the hem next and then finish that other cuff last, just in case I run out of time, because now I've shown you how to do the hem of the cuff anyway. You'll know how to do the other one. So that's done. So you can see that my thread is a bit contrasting there. I've just zigzagged all the way around. So that's the hem. So the last thing I need to do is the hem band. That's a bit of fun. All right, so we're up to page 13 if you're following along here. Oh, I got myself with a pin again. Okay, so here's the hem band. Okay, so right sides together, just like all the other bands we've done. You're going to sew those short raw edges together with the 1 centimetre seam allowance. So I'm just going straight to the overlock, or I'm not even pinning mine because it's such a short seam. Just going straight over. You can sew all of this sweater on a regular sewing machine, just with a zigzag stitch. Okay. Now you would go and press that seam to one side, and then you're going to wrong sides together, press the hem band together lengthwise. So So you're folding it in half like this, all the sides together, and give that a little press. I'll just put it over here, it's a bit easier to do. And then make sure that you're lining up your raw edges evenly there. I'm going to pin mine together. And have another attempt at the iron. I hate it when things defeat me. The iron has defeated me today. Okay. But we will get there. So if you press this, it definitely makes it much easier to sew in place. Once you've pressed it together, and just pin those edges together. Well, actually, you could get away without pinning the edges together. I'm just doing it because my iron's not working. So I'm just pinning the edges together to keep it all in line. Okay, so I'm just reading just to make sure I'm not missing anything for you guys. Yeah, it's exactly the same as the neckband. So we're going to, you've got your little seam there, and that's going to be sewn in at the side seam of the sweater, but just halve that and find the other half. So that would be the other side seam, and we need to find the centre front and centre back. So then halve it again like that, so it's in quarters now, and then we'll pop a pin at one point there, and then just opposite that point, that'll be your centre front and centre back. So you've matched 4 points, you've quartered it just like you did with your neckband, okay? And then go and grab your sweater. I think I will turn it, which won't be easiest, yeah, turn it inside out. Okay, like this. Just have a loose thread there. That's one of my basting threads to take out. There we go. And then match your seam on your hemband to one of the side seams. So you've got right sides together, and pin that in place. Yeah, I want to match it pretty well here because that is going to be noticeable. Okay, my fabric's curling a little bit. Oh, sorry, I forgot one. I don't think I've found my, no, sorry, start that again. I need to find the centre front and the centre back of my sweater. I forgot to do that. There we go. So I've just folded it in half, find the centre front and the centre back. Yeah, my fabric's really curling here. This is going to be a little bit tricky, but we'll get there. Use your fingers to roll it out. Okay, and then right sides together, matching those quarter points. So side seams. And then the centre front. And the other side seam. Centre back. And then just using your fingers, sorry, I've got an itchy nose, to just, if it's rolling like mine is, you just roll it out with your fingers and pin. Lots of pins if that's happening, and stretching that to fit. And can you see I'm using that heel of my hand again to help hold everything in place. All right, getting a little hot here. I'm right next to our heater. It's crap by the film there. So stretching. Now this won't be as stretchy as your neckband and your cuffs because it sits on your hips, so it's not quite as much to ease there. Almost there. Sewing takes quite a bit of patience. I think that if you don't have patience, you will certainly learn patience the more you sew. Okay, so that's all pinned in. I think look at that pinned. Yeah. So now I'm going to baste that with a long straight sewing stitch on my machine because I am not certain with that curling up. If I go straight to the overlocker, is it going to stay in place? So I'm just going straight to the sewing machine with a long stitch and 1 centimetre seam allowance. I'll just sew that together. My pins up here. Okay. So you're just stretching a little bit as you sew. So you can see I'm just sort of starting and stopping every, 5 or 10 centimetres. You don't have to sew in one big continuous line. I'm happy I basted that in because it is a little bit tricky. It's rolling up a little bit, this one. So now I've basted it, I can actually have a look and see if I'm happy with my sewing. Make sure there's no weird puckers going on there. Looks pretty good to me. Yeah, that's all right. Now at this point, you can try it on, fit it, make sure you're happy with that hemband. But I am just going to overlock it now. I need to move it. Almost there. Just a bit of top stitching to go and we're done. Perfect timing. And then you will press that seam towards the body and top stitch from the right side, just like we've done before with a little zigzag stitch. So I'm just going to use my finger to press it up. With my little zigzag stitch, so I'll put it back to zigzag again, and I'm going to go 2 width and 2 length. So I'm just feeling underneath there for that seam allowance, pushing back towards the body. A couple of millimeters away from that seam. When you're top stitching, try not to stretch the fabric too much. You want to let the feed dogs do all the work, because sometimes when you stretch it too much, it creates sort of this little bubbling effect. So just let the feed dogs take it. And if you feel like that it's, the machine's not threading or guiding it through, take the pressure off your presser foot. So lower that. Alrighty. I just had an awful thought then that my bobbin had run out. And look, it's still there. The good thing about modern machines, not like the old days, you can see how much thread you've got left in your bobbin. All right, so I've done that. So I'm going to show you that as well. So I've just top stitched that. And then all I have to do to finish this now, and I do have time, is just hem the cuff on the other side. So again, just 1 inch or 2.5 centimetre hem. I need to turn it the other way. So from the inside. Okie dokie, okie dokie. I keep saying that today. Okie dokie. Very aware of what you say a lot when you start filming yourself. I say little all the time. My little sewing machine, my little pin, and okie dokie. My cat's name's Okie, but she has disappeared somewhere. She normally sits up here with me when I'm sewing. Okay, so I've pinned that in place, 2.5 centimetres, and back to the zigzag stitch. Again, top stitch, yep, I'm still on it from when I hemmed. Pop that underneath. And last hem I did was the folded edge was lined up with 1.5 centimetres or 5/8 of an inch. So if I keep my folded edge lined up with that, I'm going to have a nice straight hem. So this has taken about 2 hours all up to sew, plus my cutting time. So you could probably get this done in about 3 hours if you've got 3 hours to spend one afternoon, one rainy afternoon. Sewing's always good to do in the cooler weather. All right, and that's that one done. So now I'm just going to chop off all my little extra threads there. And that's all done. We've got our Soho sweater sewn. So you just go around and chop off any extra little threads that you can find, neaten it all up. Give it a little press as well. I'm actually going to try this on, see what it looks like. Hopefully it fits. And just check what I'm wearing underneath. I've got a tank top on, so I'm not going to flash anybody today. All right. So I'm just going to pop this on. We'll have a little look. That's the back. It feels cozy. It's fleecy on the inside. Beautiful. Oh, I'm liking it. How's that? Beautiful. I just need to give that neckband a little press because I actually redid the neckband from last week. I felt like it was a little bit too loose. So I'm just going to stand up and show you. Oh, it's actually quite good. I'm just poking out there because of my belt. But once I give that a little press, I might have to stand back here so you can see me. Oh, I really like it. Yeah, it's great. Once I give that a little press, oh, I'm really happy with it. I've got another sweater. All right. Well, thanks, guys, for sewing along with me. I will be doing another sew along. Oh, sorry, I got a hair in my mouth. But special requests, I'm thinking the Sienna shift dress because that seems to be a popular pattern. But if you've got any requests, let me know what you would like and we'll do another sew along. Thanks for joining me, guys. So I'll see you next time.